Hey y'all, it's the captain here with the captain's treasure chest. Oh, of course, it's not a treasure chest. It's a manila envelope with a bunch of papers that I took out of it. And yeah, well, I'll call it a treasure chest. Yarr. And like I can pull off the pirate thing. I do, as I understand, maybe have some Viking in me somewhere back there, I think. Something like that. But I don't know. That's just neither here nor there. This is something I mentioned in my previous video. This new series I'm going through called The Captain's Treasure Chest. It's this stack of papers that are things that my mom dug up after I graduated college, or just around when I was about to, I guess. These come from the school district in which I was, and actually others beyond that, basically through elementary and high school. It's just all the documentation of all the professional interventions and things I had done while I was going through developmental difficulties, while I was on the spectrum. It should be noted that nobody in all that time, either my parents or any professionals who evaluated me or gave me therapy, had any idea, in my case, or in many cases, about autism spectrum disorder, in the sense that they didn't think that they didn't really understand it very well at all until after I would have been, probably around the time I would have been getting done with college. At least in the common sense, it was not really as understood until right about that time very well here in the States. But this begins chronologically with my fourth grade year. This is what I'm going to talk about today, is just just where the things really started to get crazy. And I'd already been in public school with other kids since second grade. I'd been homeschooled for kindergarten and first grade. I guess on the surface, the way I outwardly let on, I seemed to be fairly normal developmental wise as a kid, but it was hard to really tell, that anything was going on with me that was going to be especially challenging down the road. But by the time, especially once I started elementary school, and especially after I'd been in that environment, and once that environment, I guess something about my fourth grade year, things were really overwhelming. And as you know, if you're on the if you follow it, if you've seen my videos, I talk about how sensory inputs and overloads are very easily overwhelming to people on the autism spectrum and debilitating, and can draw us in and cause us to not function. And that was definitely becoming the case with me to an even greater level my fourth grade year. And it concerned my parents, especially because, and according to the text in here, some of the boys in my class, and I do recall some of the boys in my class picking on me a lot. I talked about bullying in another video of mine, and of course, many on the autism spectrum can be on the receiving end of that. Many people who are bullies, or kids who tend to be bullies, like to pick on other kids who they know are different, and from whom they know they can get a different reaction, and feel like they can just exert power and take advantage of their weakness and vulnerabilities. That was happening to me. It was hard for me to relate it as easily as some other kids might. Not that it's always easy to go through bad and traumatic experiences if you're a kid or at any age, but especially when you have limited ability to express what's bothering you. Even more so when you're on the autism spectrum. It was hard for me to do that with my parents, and it was hard for me sometimes to even know whether it was totally something that was wrong with me or the other person. And when I guess from what I can judge here, after having told my parents, that I'm having problems with kids or that my parents were able to pick up on that. They, of course, went to my teacher about it. My teacher referred me to the school psychologist about certain things that she knew were problematic with me, I guess, and they talk about those things. They says basically I had already been met with the psychologist because I had issues with the sound of or anticipation of the sound of the fire alarm. There's another video where I talk about sound sensitivity in people on the spectrum, and that certainly was the case with me. And especially when it's loud and unexpected. That's not the case with every sound that some might consider loud, but it certainly is with certain ones. And I guess that was one that particularly set me off. And it says that basically one of the early evaluations, it talks about me withdrawing into my own little world, my rocking behavior. Sometimes that's how I would do to cope when especially I was felt like, the environment around me was, was closing in on me, and I was trying to deal with the sensory overload of the situation. I had a low and monotone voice, complaints of others hitting him, peers' perception of him as weird. Those are things that definitely are challenges that many kids on the autism spectrum can have. And it was the case with me. What's crazy is my parents do mention how they had noticed signs of withdrawal and autistic-like tendencies. It's amazing how they just in passing, maybe without realizing it, had actually called it right then off the bat, but nobody could have known, not them nor anybody else, even in the professional field, the professionals who were dealing with me at that point. So goes with referral and background. Obviously physical health was good. I had good physical health. They even talked about the fact that I've been always very sensitive with loud sounds. They say that my speech was very good even at a young age, and funny enough, many on the spectrum can have amazing capabilities as far as their ability to actually speak words or even read them off a page. And I could do that at a young age at a level that was probably unheard of for kids my age, even when I was 2 or 3 years old. And I could read him with inflection. My parents said he never said a word unless it was perfect. And it says now he mumbles a lot and is hard to understand. A lot of that probably had to do with the fact that I was in an environment where I was forced to actually express and give feedback in a verbal way that was just not natural for me, and especially in an environment that was very overwhelming. Presently, things that upset me were fire drills, anything that me feels is unjust. I guess that's things that my parents probably would say. My parents say always sensitive to us being angry with him. I guess maybe, I don't know, that's another set of, I guess, issues that are hard to tackle right now. I can't always look back into every situation where my parents were upset with me and stuff, and know if it was justified or not. That's just, I guess maybe their reaction and the way they reacted sometimes, it actually hit me even harder than it would some other kids. Jumping and trotting around while watching TV. Sometimes certain programs or certain things I'd see on TV really would excite me in some way. I mean, in a joyous way, it's funny. Rarely sitting and the biting of his fingernails. I guess I do remember that. That's another thing that probably was a coping thing. It talks about I would occasionally look away after a question had been posed when I was being talked to. I would be thinking about a response only to turn to the examiner and say, what was the question? Sometimes his conversation revealed a well-developed vocabulary, yes, probably not able to really express it and put it into good sentences and respond to situations. Sometimes he would pick at his fingernails while listening. At first he was non-committal, saying, "I'm not sure, I guess I would rather, I don't know what to say." You know, it's just kind of hard in that kind of environment, come to think of it, just as my unprofessional but experiential observation. It's kind of hard to really get a good and easy and feedback out of a kid, in an environment like that, where you're just telling him questions. Maybe in that situation I felt like I had to give a right answer, and if I gave the wrong answer I would do bad, or something on the test like that. I don't know. It talks about one of the teachers observed, said, "I wander aimlessly around the classroom and oblivious to the lesson being taught and to the eyes of the other students watching his peculiar actions." Of course, if you're on the spectrum, you may not always pick up on others as, that's one of the things. We know there's something about us, but we can't always tell what others are picking up on us. It's not like we are so self-conscious because we feel like we're not always self-aware. When he is not wandering, he can be seen standing at the air conditioner, looking out of the window and beating on the air conditioner with both hands. I guess that was another coping mechanism to try to drown out the environment, Speaking a monotone, barely parting his lips. This makes him sound like he's mumbling. Usually accompanies this with a stiff-legged rocking movement, and this gives an odd appearance. Well, of course it's an odd appearance. I mean, it just is what it is. Yeah, basically there's all these tests that were done. The Welshler Intelligence Scale for Children. I need to look into some of these tests and know what they were all about, because I don't even know if these particular tests are done anymore. Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, Test of Written Language, just other Achenbach Child Behavior Checklist. I mean, who knows how archaic maybe these tests are nowadays, done for kids. I mean, the book has been flipped in many ways, and a lot of times, in many cases, that's actually much for the better. Maybe not in every way, but certainly in a lot of ways. Yeah, it just talks about how I get a pretty good intelligence scores on whatever tests, I definitely get in the upper percentile of a lot of those, so they get that. They knew I could do things when it come to actually doing written stuff or even working with numbers. It's just that when it had to do with environment and societal or social situations that I really crumbled. And that's definitely exemplary of a challenge of kids on the spectrum. It's one thing to actually get them for us to actually do work, and I could do it, but then I was forced to actually do it while I was fording the river of dealing with other kids, whoever they might be, bully or not, dealing with a teacher, whatever she was up to or saying, or or drawing, or doing whatever it was. And then, oh, by the way, there's this thing called the fire alarm, and there's this thing called whatever, I don't know, just the classroom environment in general. It's just a lot of sensory things you dealt with on a daily basis, and it was just a barrage. There's more that talk about bullies, difficulty and frustration in relationships with boys his age, evidenced not only by the reports of his teachers and parents, but was forcefully illustrated by telling of a story at a pretty fast clip of two twin boys and a little boy in a tug of war. Apparently, I don't know, this is one of the child apperception test, I think, is whatever it is. It's just so weird. And there appears to be anger at the twin boys, who never get punished but must be punished one of these days. They laugh and are unconcerned when the little boy gets hurt. Finally, there is forgiveness on the part of the little boy who takes the blame for falling and breaking his neck. Obviously, I'm the one in that story. I'm in a situation where I feel like it's my fault that others are picking on me. Because I feel like there's I guess the onslaught of everything that's being done to me is making it feel like I'm the problem. I'm the problem. Everybody else is fine. I'm the problem. And it's the conclusion, I mean, kind of touches on I guess maybe a word I picked up out of there, kind of, I grabbed on. It basically says, in conclusion, my parents may wish to seek a consultation with a private psychologist or psychiatrist to follow up. My parents said they would do that. I, of course, did end up doing that. I ended up being in therapy in one way or another pretty much throughout the end of elementary school into middle and high school, you know, and a little beyond that too. I was advised to go to to be put partly in another school in the district basically it was special class, if you want to use outdated terms. It was for students having serious social, emotional, and behavioral handicaps. It's very interesting they use that word. I'm not saying that word may not have validity in some sense, but it is not it gives the connotation that kids who have these challenges are always deficient. And I guess that's how I felt. If you have a kid or on the autism spectrum, or if you're on the autism spectrum and you remember growing up that way, I think you can relate. There's a good chance you can relate probably to feeling like that maybe you're handicapped in some way or made to feel like it. Maybe not on purpose by other adults or other people. And thankfully nowadays they understand more about it so that they don't make, kids or people in that situation feel as much like that. But especially in those days, I felt the full weight of feeling like there was just some handicap about me. I think my parents, with all their being, didn't want to feel that there was a serious handicap with me. They didn't want me to see that way. And maybe to some extent, they probably wanted me to somehow be able to get through school and through life not feeling like that. But it was impossible for me not to, because I had this issue in me, and this really what it comes down to in the brain. If you're on the autism spectrum, you have this diversity in the brain. I hate to call it an abnormality, because who knows what normal is, but it's in your brain. It's not something you can just pull and grab out through brain surgery, and if to do so would just completely be the end of you, and that's not acceptable. But to say that you're handicapped in that sense, certainly, and the fact that the professionals who can reach that conclusion about me, whether they really meant to or not, kind of shows a lot about what I guess may have been deficient in some way, and especially in those days, about kids who are on the autism spectrum and the ways in which they were being dealt with, I guess. But I'll tell you this, it's a lot to take in, and a lot of perspective comes around after reading something like this. I've been through a lot lately just in our own house. I've had to deal with an issue with some big repair. I actually got a water heater and actually managed to hook it up, and it ended up not working, but I found out a lot more has to be done. But the fact that I've just had to do a lot of adulting lately. It's amazing that I can basically tackle all of this, and I'm in a situation where I have the money that I can deal with it, because a lot of people and a lot of kids who grew up in situations like I've just described while I was in 4th grade may not at least have the likelihood of being in a position where I at least am a guy who has a wife and a kid and a house to take care of, and it can actually do that. But it's important for me to remember that, hey, no matter what's been said about me or done about me, I've done well with the help of those who love me and know me and know and want what's best for me. And that's a lot to think about. But we've just scratched the surface, so we're going to do more digging through the treasure chest. So we got more episodes of The Captain's Treasure Chest coming up soon here on the Captain's YouTube. And I will see you on our next voyage.